Good morning, good evening around the world. And welcome to the latest edition of our Traction live stream series. And today we're going to be chatting with Peter V, the wonderful developer of our most recent Traction Presents launch, of course, the wonderful Abyss that we just saw the intro movie on just there ahead of this. And just for those internet commenters who love to come onto our intro movies and say they hate them because they don't show anything about the synth, please always do just click through to the site, because there will be much more videos about the synth on the site. So don't get too bored about the first intro videos. They're there to set the scene and the mood for the instrument. So with that ado, Peter, welcome. How is beautiful Hamburg today?
Oh yeah, we have brilliant weather, which is probably happening only once per year. So today is the day.
Fabulous. You turn some Abyss controls and out comes the sunshine.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
See how long it lasts.
Indeed. Oh dear. Excellent. Well, let's dive in and learn a bit about this wonderful instrument and yourself, of course. I think everyone wants to hear you speaking more, because I saw lots of comments about your wonderful accents. So I'll try not to speak quite so much, and Peter, you can do most of the speaking. So, so I mean, let's get started. I mean, obviously, there's some information about your background on the side, but not a whole hell of a lot. So, tell us, what brought you to creating Abyss? What's your inspiration for this? What's your background? I know, talking backstage, we were chatting about this, how you've developed a few instruments just for your own, use. But so there's a bit of a journey that kind of occurred to get you to Abyss. So let's start there.
Okay, good. So I think it started something like 3-4 years ago, and actually I saw a video on YouTube about modular stuff, and I thought, wow, that's interesting. And when I was a kid, I always envied these people who have this big modular synthesizer, and I thought, well, I need to get something like that and to play with it. And from a musician point of view, I have more of a classical background. I was always fascinated by synthesizers and synthesizer music, but I also play the bassoon and the contrabassoon, and I have a little bit experience in orchestration and traditional music and stuff like that. So when, for the first time, I tried to do something with a modular, that was kind of strange for me. I had to give up all that control that I was used to, and instead I had a lot of happy accidents, and I had to learn how to actually create music with it. And it was quite fun, and I had so much fun with it that I started wondering, why do I have less fun when I'm doing music just with my computer? Because actually all that sounds in principle I could also get out of a normal computer with software, but it is completely different. And then I started thinking about it, and also started taking notes. When did I felt that I'm really in the flow, and why did that happen? And I realized a couple of things, and one thing was that you need to have something which is aesthetically pleasing, which is tactile, and also simple in a way, but on the other hand, a bit of mysterious. You do not always know, if I do something here, what is going to happen on the other end. And that experience was driving my idea to create a music instrument which is a little bit different. And there it all started. Then I created tons of prototypes. I tried out various things. And another observation that I made is that usually you have that MIDI notion. There's a note on and there's a note off. But for example, if I play a note on the bassoon, it has a start, it has some kind of an attack. I'm going to shape the timbre with my posture, with my breath, with my everything. And there's so much going on when I play just one note that you simply cannot capture with note on and note off. And I thought, what could be conveying more information than just that on-off thingy? And then after some time I came to the idea that maybe colors are transporting so much information. And so I started reading about it. And that was also fascinating because I learned a lot about how our brain processes music, timbre and stuff like that. And that people already know for a long, long time that when we talk about timbre, we say, well, it's a cold one, or it is a warm one, it's a rough one, or it's a lush one, and stuff like that. And it's exactly the same words that we use to describe surfaces. And so I started, well, so with visual things, you can squeeze in much more information. And Abyss is just the first instrument of a series that is yet to come. It uses this most simple approach by just taking one color per sound, but there's also a lot of other possibilities to include, for example, patterns, textures and stuff like that, so that amount of visual information can be increased and can create a lot more things that you can use for the music. So that is a long story of how that came to being.
Well, I think one of the interesting things we touched on previously backstage was kind of the link with, I know it's a cheesy buzzword, but artificial intelligence and machine learning and, and obviously your background in that and how that has sort of helped, again, shape this sort of methodology for the user interface. And, I mean, I was sharing the story with you about our own sort of explorations into AI. And I think, generally most people like me who are not deep in the developer sort of world personally, I'm not a software guy myself, but you kind of hear about AI so much that I think you kind of imagine yourself talking to a computer and the computer sort of generating a bunch of amazing generative content immediately. And, it's the Hollywood sort of style, move stuff with some gloves and all of a sudden you've got a amazing, hit record in your hands. And the reality is, AI is a long way from that. But, the interesting thing, and I think the thing that we were sharing was how you can sort of take AI, less in that sort of buzz approach of it, but using, computers to essentially manage huge data sets and present them to you to make creative decisions. And you can totally see that with obviously the color gradient, nav tool that you have in Abyss. I mean, it's a good representation of kind of machine presenting huge amounts of information and making it very appealing for you to just quickly pick and choose from, which absolutely is that sort of journey towards, more evolving AI.
Yeah, I totally agree. And we had a brief discussion already to warm up before that stream. And I, of course, also made a couple of experiments and follow closely what's going on in that AI and music world. But so far, I'm really not convinced. And to me, it looks like you take a bunch of data, you train an artificial intelligence, and then you get out the average of everything that you put in. So if you want to make escalator music, that may be the right thing. If you want to do anything that has a label of creativity, then typically that music that comes out with from artificial intelligence, it is not very convincing. But on the other hand, when you're doing music, when you're producing or composing, there's also a lot of work which takes a lot of time, which is tedious and which is normally not that stuff that you really love. It is something that you still need to do. And there I think there's some potential for AI in the future to help doing that stuff. One example, for example, is when you're doing an orchestration, let's say for a classical or Hollywood score, then usually you start with having laid out a couple of themes and melodies, and you have a couple of chords, and then somehow you need to do all that orchestration, instrument by instrument, and if you do it on a computer, then also articulation by articulation. And that is something where AI, I think, can help. Another thing is expressivity of instruments. So nowadays, everyone is using that sample libraries, and you can get that awesome, let's say, string sound. But then still, it's so much manual work to make it really sound good, and you end up with 25 lanes of automation data that you need to put in to make a convincing mock-up with these kind of instruments.
Yeah.
But actually that's kind of a tedious work, and the way how musicians, for example, do the phrasing is to a large extent something that can be learned, and could be that information usually, for example, if the conductor in the orchestra is talking to me, she says like, okay, I would like to have that tension point here, or do a little bit less there. And I know exactly what she knows. But if I'm sitting in front of a door and need to make that mock-up, it takes me 1 hour to do the same kind of phrasing. There, I think there's some potential, but it is less in that real creativity.
Absolutely. I mean, it's, we try and put in a lot of our messaging, this sort of core philosophy of, musicians sort of finding their own sound, which is essentially sort of obviously being able to easily translate their unique sort of sound that they have in their head into reality and create bits of music from it. I mean, there are just dozens of examples of artists that become extremely popular. And the reason they become popular is because they've pioneered a unique sound, their sound.
Yeah.
And then they can continue to produce it because there's been a journey for them to actually create that particular sound. I think that's where AI has some great potential, in that, to create your own sound and have your own sort of library of your own content that you can then write song after song after song means a lot of databasing. It means a lot of discipline in, doing a whole hell of a lot of sampling, and then, curating your own libraries, and which, like you say, is kind of fairly tedious, boring work.
Yeah.
Now, if there are tools that can help do that, it essentially sort of puts you in the best position to then pull from it and create your own sound. I mean, you could talk about instruments and people just using presets versus learning how to actually, get a particular sound out of it and then be able to do it repeatedly. We strongly try and encourage that. But yeah, anyway, we won't go too deep into AI landscape. We spent a whole hour talking about it. So let's go dive into the instrument a bit. Give us the walkthrough and sort of your philosophy on the layout, and give us the straight from the developer Abyss walkthrough.
Okay, I'll do so. So actually it's looking pretty simple. So here you have that normal controls that you have in any synthesizer. There's a filter section. You have that pitch and tune, the level, the pan. That's something that you will find in any synthesizer. Here on the left, there's a couple of controller inputs. It supports MPE. So if you have an MPE controller like the ORLC board or anything else, then you can use it for that thing, but you don't need to. You can also use a standard keyboard controller, and then it is automatically understanding where is the data coming from and interpreting it. And I will show a little bit later that you can use this to modulate whatever you see here. Then also pretty straightforward. There's a couple of envelopes, a couple of LFOs. Well, and then you have an FX section, which is also quite straightforward. Just a couple of effects and some things. The only thing that makes Abyss really special, or maybe there are two things, is that element in the middle, which is the tone color gradient, and it works together with that panel here, where you can serve a lot of tone colors, and then every single dot represents one sound. So if I click it, you should be able to hear it, and if I move it around, then you will hear a lot of these, and in this way you can browse sounds very, very fast. And then if you find the sound that you like, for example, I like that one, I take it and put it here. I choose another one. Oh, that's a cool one. I put it here. On the other side, I remove that one and maybe one more. Oh, that seems not to fit at all, so I take it to see what we can do with it. we go. So we place
And
it.
I think just while we're on the color gradient stuff, I mean, this is a good example of that, of your AI brain presenting a huge data set of sounds in a way that, you know, you can very quickly, you know, navigate it with the colors. You know immediately what style of sound it's going to be, it's what its timbre is going to be, and then, you know, it's such a lovely way of just obviously, you know, probing and investigating a large number of potential, you know, sound sources.
Yeah, and so initially I had that idea, well, it is going to help me to have that overview. And then actually when I done it and when I tried it out for myself for the first times, I realized that there are two interesting things that happen. The one thing is, of course, that let's say it is impossible to take 2000 timbres or tone colors and put them in a two-dimensional space so that you will always have only those close to each other that are almost the same, because there's the way our ears process sound is far more complex. But it is an approximation, it works great. And what I find funny, sometimes I think, I want to have something similar like that, and then I search in the environment, and then I find something which probably before I wouldn't have considered as similar, but I think, well, damn, that's a perfect one, I take it.
So the it's the happy accident generator.
Happy accidents, yeah.
Fantastic.
And the other thing that I observed when I started creating patches with it was I started to thinking differently. So for example, very often I think, well, I have already something which is more in that brighter orange yellow thing. I should do some contrast on the other end. Or I would like to have something which is a little bit more towards that grayish thing, because this is more like noise-like. And somehow, automatically, after you have spent a little bit of time with it, you start thinking about sound in a slightly different way, and you're getting inspiration from a slightly different way. And then you can also transfer it to your door. So when I, for example, did that trailer music for that 1 minute thingy that we just watched, I also started coloring the tracks in my door similar to that sound. And it ended up to, well, I'm always doing it, but here it ended up that in a way that the colors that I used in the sounds and the colors that I had in the tracks, somehow that worked quite well with each other. You could saw, okay, this groups nicely together and it blends also in the mix and stuff like that. So it's a slightly different way to find inspiration and to think about sound design.
I love the intro music, by the way. That was well done. It's that sort of animal purring noise that it just lends. It's so organic. It's lovely. You know, you really sort of, it inspires visuals of some creature, you know, sort of, you know, I mean, it's brilliant.
Which is lingering in the abyss.
Exactly. It's excellent. Well done. So back into the instrument. Let's continue the tour.
Yeah, okay. So, and right now we placed these things on the tone color, and I will remove all that modulation stuff so that we have a clean thing. And so what happens right now with the position slider, you see, I can move whether the sound is taking from one end or from the middle or from the other end. And so here I think I should exchange these two, because then it's a little bit more natural progression of sounds. And that's also something in the sound design here. Many sounds I created in a way that I think of tension, like low tension on one end and higher tension on the other end. This is like with a musical instrument, you also have that expressiveness always comes from more versus less, from playing something 40 or piano. And with that tone color or timbre typically changes. But of course, you can also go crazy and put all kind of hundreds of tone colors in and do something with it. So, but then you don't want to use the mouse to manually move these things around. So one simple thing is I could attach it to the mod wheel, or here, because I'm having, I'm sitting in front of a keyboard, I simply want to control it with the amount of aftertouch or pressure. So what I do is I crank up that slider, and because this one is selected right now, this modulator, which is how much I press that thing, is right now controlling the position. And in this way, I have control over the sound and can start doing something with it. Then, for example, in order to give a little bit more attention, I could increase also that dirt thing if I put more crank that one on, and so on. And so from here it becomes relatively natural how you work with all that modulations. And it is, I believe it is quite intuitive, because you always see all the modulations that are involved. It is animated here, so you always, it's like what you see is what you get. And it is quite simple in terms and efficient in terms of how you actually do that modulation, because I'm always getting a little bit afraid if there's a huge synth and then they have that frightening modulation matrix which looks like an Excel spreadsheet.
Oh, we have some of those.
Yeah. And sometimes it is
that's
great.
the way Wolfram's brain works. He goes super deep.
And that is great. And the point is, here you have all the same possibilities of a modulation matrix, but it is not showing that Excel sheet view to you.
Yep.
Because like if I click that one, all these sliders are right now the modulation values for cutoff. If I click here, it shows all the modulation values for pitch. So if you think in that Excel sheet thing, whenever you click here, you are seeing a different column of that modulation matrix, but it is hiding that scary mathematical view of things from the user, and you don't need to do any kind of drag and drop thing. It's just, oh, I want to have that modulated by that, and by this one, and by that one, but in the opposite direction by that one. And if you want to do that, well, it's a 2-second thing, and it's quite intuitive and fast workflow.
Yep.
Yeah,
it's quite fascinating actually from a developer perspective. That creating instruments is very much like creating music. You know, there are certainly sort of genres, you know, within, you know, all of these developments within the products, right? I mean, you definitely have sort of products like an artist like Wolfram who think in a particular way, and their brains develop instruments that are incredibly deep and capable. But you know, to an average person, maybe, you know, they're never going to get the most out of it. I mean, they're essentially what I call it, you know, a synth for a synth head. You know, I mean, it appeals to a particular genre of user, and then we have other instruments, and Abyss, you know, and Spacecraft in our Traction Presents have these beautiful UIs, and they're instantly accessible, and they appeal to another subset. It's just quite fascinating to watch. So there's so many similarities between people actually writing music and the genres within the music that gets created. But, you know, equally, we have the same sort of rules of, you know, generating stuff that's new and inspirational. And, you know, and I think that's why Abyss has, you know, for want of a better word, struck such a chord with the user base. Is it's, you know, it's a real abstract, came out of nowhere, different approach, which is, you know, really nice.
Yeah, and one thing that really resonates with me, what you just said. So when I started that journey of thinking about creating this kind of instrument, I always thought to myself, I don't want it just to be a piece of technology. I want to be it a piece of art. Maybe that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but I wanted to have it that quality that a piece of art has. So I thought, well, I'm willing to give it a little bit of character and to be a little bit odd creature maybe, which does not fulfill all the expectations that you have. How does a synthesizer have to look like? So for example, here I have that thingies, and
the
to be honest, when I started creating these, I thought, well, maybe people are going to come back and say, well, why didn't you hire a designer who really knows how to make that awesome 3D thingies? And I thought, well, I'm an indie developer and I think Abyss has something natural or organic, and I wanted to have it. I didn't want to pretend that this is a work of a company with 100 employees. This is a work of one person putting. I was trying to put my personality a little bit into it. And
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and again, just like music production, right? It's, don't copy others. The real interesting stuff is where you've done something unique and exactly as you say, it becomes your character. And that also shines through with our message we said earlier about music production and, having the discipline to have a vision for not just that next song that you're writing. Because I think all of us that write music as a hobby have at some point written a track that we're like, yes, that's amazing. But if you can't write another track that's just as good and another track that's just as good and another track that's just as good, then you're not going to be successful. I mean, the people who are really successful are the guys, who have the discipline to create the libraries, to create their sound, and then be able to churn out, a career's worth of music from that, not just one single hit. So, and I think that's what's really interesting about what you said earlier on Abyss, is that you have a vision for not just Abyss, but the next set of instruments that build on it. And that's, again, it's so much similar to just the music production paradigm. So
yeah,
I know I'm looking forward to seeing what's coming. So
yeah, me too. So maybe just as a side note, I did some. So I'm already working on the next instrument, and a couple of days ago, I think it was on the weekend, I did the first acoustic simulation. It is still in a very prototype base, but at least I was really blown away. I already thought before, well, that's probably going to be a very nice idea that I had, but actually I was amazed by it, and so I'm more a shy person coming from North Germany. We are not very much about bragging about something, but that was really something where I said, well, I think at least the next instrument is going to be quite a hit because it is going to be lovely. So
fantastic.
Stay tuned.
Well, I know we're all going to be waiting for that one with bated breath. I'm getting it. I'm just even chatting about this. I'm getting interesting ideas, again, inspired by music production, to take our developer sort of community now. We've got quite a few developers, on the Traction Present side and our own internal guys, and start doing remixes of each other's instruments. I'd love to sort of see if that was a possible future. I have no idea if it is, but anyway. Actually, while we're talking about stuff, so Traction Presents, for those of you who don't know what that means, we'll sort of run through it quickly. Obviously, Julian Storer, my partner in Traction, is the founder of Juice, the developer library, which is utilized heavily by plugin developers, across the industry. And so we have a long history of, being intrinsically stitched into kind of the developer world. And, Jules is a keynote at the Audio Developer Conference every year and stuff. So, I mean, he really is kind of one of the real standout rock stars in the audio developer world. And, when we formed Traction and started building it, we wanted to keep that. And so the Traction Presents program essentially is a means for us to assist indie developers to bring their product to commercial success. Different developers need different things. Some people need just the infrastructure of a website and authorization and all of that kind of stuff. Some developers need, critiquing. I mean, it's just a whole different sort of set. And out of many sort of applications that we give feedback to everyone. And we certainly get quite a few more applications than we actually bring to the world. We're quite sort of, we're very selective about what we actually end up presenting. But there's this sort of process of assisting indies to get their products to market. I think you're now our fourth Presents partner. How's it been for you? I mean, hopefully you've been finding it useful. I mean, I know you reached out to us several months ago, and we all saw the instrument for the first time. We were like, yes, this thing's great.
Yeah, so first of all, Abyss is also coded in with Juice, because I think this is simply the industry standard. And if you want to create something, and also if you want to create a code base which is efficient, which is CPU efficient, there is no other possibility than to do it with Juice, and it's awesome stuff. And so if you're going to write your own plugin, have a look to it. Of course, it is C++, which is kind of a steep learning curve if you haven't done any kind of coding before, but it's also worthwhile to do it. Then with Attraction Presence, I knew that program exists, and I was always fascinated because there's so many new synths coming out every week, every month, and it's even sometimes hard to catch up with all that new stuff coming in. But then if you have a closer look, then very often you find, well, it's actually has the same capabilities than 2 or 3 more synths that you already had. But with that Traction portfolio, it was always something which kind of had a different approach to things, be it like with Waverazer, where you have that completely new patented technology, which makes that sharp, noisy, like tones, which are very powerful and aggressive. Is it like biotech, which has a textured or organic thing and also has quite often interesting user interface? Also, for example, Spacecraft, I think, is awesome because of its UI. It is granular. Well, granular, there exists a lot of granular things, but then there's always the question, how is that interaction with the synth going, and how much fun is it, and how easy it is to get the best out of the samples that you are granularizing. So these were all excellent instruments, also in a way that they were a little bit special. So for me, it was always on number 1 position that I said, well, I'm going to reach out to Traction and ask whether they are interested. And I was extremely happy when I think I made it to you, and I got an answer back 24 hours later, something like that, where you said, well, looks interesting, we will have a closer look. And you see, I'm a developer, and that's what I really love. I love creating instruments, but I don't want to spend huge amounts of time in setting up a shop. I don't want to spend huge amount of time in dealing with all that legal things if you distribute a product to 173 countries. How you deal with that currency exchange things and stuff like that. That's a huge amount of work, and that's work that other people can do. I don't want to do that. It's probably I could if I take that learning curve, but it would take me a huge amount of either time or money. And I think it is better spent if I create more instruments. So I think it's a perfect partnership to have someone like Traction, where you take care for those things. And then there's that element, if I would have released Abyss 2 weeks ago, then right now, I would have 5 people who would have noticed it. And that probably one would be my mom, one would be my wife, my 2 children, and then maybe a friend of mine. And it is hard to break through and to get noticed. And you need to have that structure, how to make a press release. You need to have all that context and stuff like that. That usually takes years to build, and you need to have a partner like that. And for me, it was a kind of an ideal partnership in a way that all those elements I don't want to do, you are taking care for, and all the elements where I have fun doing it. So, for example, we then discuss how are we going to do it with the introduction video. There are a couple of partners who could do that. And I said, well, I like that authenticity approach. I would like to do it myself. I have a little bit of a weird accent. And
which people love, by the way.
Hopefully. And I thought, well, I think I can do that on my own. And if it is too bad, then we can still go for the commercial option. And you said, well, yeah, let's do it. That's good. And you even encouraged me to do it like that. And that's good to have that kind of partner where I can take those elements and cherry pick that I want to do and don't have to deal with the others. So
I'd again, to sort of liken it to the music side of things, I from day one with the program, I've always thought of it in my head like being a record label.
Yes, exactly.
It's you guys are the artists, and and our whole identity for the record label is like all good sort of indies. What interests us is the stuff that is not necessarily just purely commercial. It's the real interesting boundary pushing. I mean, that's what gets us out of bed every day is the real boundary pushing side of things. Just the corporate side of just making money is we're not there yet. We're still well in the indie label stage, and we're going to bring to market the loud and the nasty and just the weird and the wonderful, and that's hopefully what people will come to us for. It certainly sounds like it was one of the reasons you came to us, which is good to hear. So
yes,
yeah, fantastic. Well, what time have we got? So we've got 20 minutes left. So
I saw one comment that I would like to react for, and that is people were asking for spectral like synth. I didn't mention it, but actually the technology behind Abyss is based on spectral models. So I was getting the question quite often whether these tone colors are samples. And I know where the question is coming from, because usually with samples you have that rich, natural or organic feeling. But here it is different. These are not samples, and these are specific models which are based on their spectral representation. I don't want to go into the technical details, but I will just show you something. So what you can do, you have a couple of parameters where you can completely change a sound. So I will activate this one right now, and then we will hear this tone color, and then I will modify it a little bit to give you an impression. So this is how it sounds right now. I can remove detail from it, which works similar to a filter but completely different. You don't get that kind of filter sweep. And let me take another one. Where is it? You get some very lovely timbres with that. You can add noise. But the way you add noise is also based on the spectral representation. So it is not just blending in some white noise or whatever. It is computing based on the spectral content. What is a musical noise? How would that same sound, if it would be, if that sound would come from a physical source in the real world, and that would be getting more noisy, how would that sound? So this is being computed and added to it. And then there are two more of these sliders, which are not that straightforward, normal spectral controls that you have in that spectral synth, but they're giving you some high-level control, which is, at least I find, quite musical and quite valuable for a sound design. So you don't need to mess up with 10 abstract spectral parameters. You have that high-level parameters that typically sound designers tend to think of, like, I would like to give it a little bit more detail. I want to have it a little bit more organic or less organic. I would like to have it more static, things like that. So I don't want to say it's a fully spectral synth that you can do whatever you want in any other spectral synth. But if you're looking for that specific kind of sounds that you are getting out of a spectral synth, then it's maybe worth to try it out. There's a 90 days free trial, and then you can have a look to that spectral capabilities.
Yeah, we should say, actually, I know it's in the chat here, but and yes, there's a 90-day free trial, but it is currently on our July 4th sale extravaganza. And just to let you know, it is our second biggest sale of the year, so it ends on Friday. if you trial it and then want to buy it later in the year, then the next big sale event is the Black Friday sale event, all the way in November. So I would suggest try it quickly and jump on it right now. Or just buy it at full price, and then we'll give Peter some more money. So that's it, which might speed him along into the next instrument, which we're all keen to see.
Yeah.
Oh, good stuff. Okay, so
I would like to mention one more thing. There was another question in the comments that I would like to answer, and that was, hey, Peter is a one-man guy. Who is going to support that instrument? Well, if something really bad is going to happen to me, then I don't know. Honestly, I don't. But I'm maybe less old than it seems, so I still hope to have a couple of years where I can do that, and I'm doing it full time. So I'm also financially backed up quite well. So I'm not going to run out of money in a year or two, and I'm going to support those instruments because, you see, I'm also a musician myself. I'm spending a lot of money into music instruments that other people create, and I know how much of an investment sometimes this is, and so. At least personally, I'm extremely committed that I'm not going to leave you standing in the rain, and I'm going to support that product as good as I can. Yeah.
Yeah, I was scrolling through. I think we've answered quite a lot of the questions that came in. Let me see. Any other questions? Apple Silicon support. Yeah.
There are two questions. So one question about the Apple Silicon Max. Yes, it supports Apple Silicon. It's an how's it called? I'm now missing the word. A universal binary. It's a universal binary, and I have purchased an M1 Mac actually to make sure that it works on that one, that it works in the right way, that the code is optimized also for that machine, and it works actually quite well. But of course, you also need to have it in a DHW then that uses it, which is compatible with it. But if it is not, then it is always falling back to that Rosetta kind of translation thing. So nothing to worry about. The other question was about IP. Okay, there is a lot of IP in the instrument, which is my own IP, which is based on my own research, but I haven't done any kind of patenting, and I actually don't want to. If someone wants to, let's say, steal that kind of intellectual property, I anyways have no legal capabilities to go against it. And actually filing a patent internationally in a way that you can really do something with it is quite expensive. It takes quite a long time, and I don't see value in it. So I say, well, I'm rather going to crank out one innovation after the other with my whole roadmap for the next couple of years, how I'm bringing new technology to the market. So even if people are going to steal something from that one, well, at that point of time, there's also already new technology out for me, and that way I'm not afraid of it at all. And if someone is interested in the IP, then you can also contact me, and I'm open for any kind of collaborations. If you see something here and you say, well, I want to do it, you don't need to steal or reverse engineer it, simply contact me, and then we can work out some kind of a licensing or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, again, much like, music, right? I mean, people get inspired by other people's songs, but, if you're the person that created it and you can write albums worth of that amazing content, then it's not really much of a concern, when people get inspired by your stuff. In fact, it's probably good that people get inspired by it. And like you say, rather reach out and connect and collaborate and do remixes and stuff like that than just try and blatantly rip it off. But yeah, and I guess that's kind of we talked about the record label approach, and I think, the classic record label would have ownership of, songs, and we don't with that. The Traction Presents program is not designed to sort of have ownership of IP. The artists, the developers, have full retention of IP and everything. It's merely a marketing and sales collaboration that we do. So again, not you don't have to sign over your IP rights to be part of the program. It's literally just a means of helping indies, commercialize these fabulous ideas.
Yeah.
Okay, let's have another scroll. Let's see. Thank you, Keating Simons, for being so thorough on the comments. I've seen your name pop up lots. Good to see you here. Let's see. Any other fresh questions coming in?
Yeah, there's one question about the sound and color correlation.
Oh yeah, Fardeen.
So actually, there's 2,000, a couple of more than 2,000 of these tone colors, and they are sorted in that two-dimensional grid in such a way that sounds that are similar to each other, that sound similar to each other, are in proximity and have similar color also. And then, of course, it's getting more gray if it is more noisy and stuff like that. So it's a visual representation of that tone quality. You can't input your own samples, which simply is for the reason that these tone colors here are not sampled. Everyone is one mathematical model of a specific tone. They had been created with the help of machine learning and AI from natural recordings, field recordings, recordings of my modular and all that stuff. But they're not sampled. They are very condensed, specific models. I hope that answers that question.
Fantastic. Right, so we've got a few minutes left. I want to hear more of the instruments. Perhaps we can just spend a few minutes just listening to some of your favorite patches that you've created. Obviously, there's a ton of patches for people to go through, but yeah, perhaps you can highlight some of your particular favorites.
Yeah, okay, that's nice. I have to think about. There are so many that I like. So that one I like, and I would just give it a play. It's very dark. Maybe that doesn't come across. Why are that screaming?
Sounds like a spaceship taking off.
The reason why I like that sound, and there are a couple more in that noise section, is that usually if you try to make that kind of wind sounds or ocean and stuff like that with a normal synthesizer, even if you have a bigger modular setup, it is quite complicated and will always sound electronically. And here you have the possibility to create something which sounds strangely convincing, like a natural thing, even though you still realize that most likely there is something specific on it. So I really like that hybrid kind of things. It's like supernatural. It sounds like natural, but exaggerated to some point. You can, of course, also do it in a way that it is only natural, but I like it when it is in that specific thing of supernatural noises. So here's another one. I find that lovely. I can do that for hours, and you should do it with headphones to get the best experience. And you shouldn't do it on YouTube or Facebook. Do it with a real thing.
Download the demo and do it with the real synth.
Yeah, exactly. There's a 90 days free demo, so
and it's completely unrestricted demo as well. So I know we get asked occasionally, like, "Oh, what can I do?" It's like, no, you get the actual real full instrument unlocked for 90 days.
Then another one that I like is, I think I have two similar. One is Krill and one is Krell. So maybe probably you all know about that Krell patch. So there was a movie, Forbidden Planet, in the 1950s, and this one was one of the first movies that had a soundtrack based only on a synthesizer. And it was used, there are some aliens in that 1950 movie, and it was used to make their communication. So basically these aliens are communicating by doing all that synth noises. And then a few years ago, one guy was replicating that kind of music with a modular patch, and that has become famous as a Krell patch. And if you really want to show off that you have deep modulation capabilities, that is something that you can do as a sound designer. So I will show it to you. So it has. It is never going to stop. No. It has a lot of elements, and basically it is. If you look here to the LFOs, for example, the rate of this LFO is controlled by this LFO, while the speed of this LFO is controlled by something else. And you can really create that kind of crazy generative things where you just play one note and then it is going to play on for a long time. And that's quite funny and can lead to very surprising and interesting results. Then there's a couple of these pads that I really like, especially those who are, that one, whoops, next one. For example, this one. I think they have some kind of oceanic feeling to it. You immediately think of
it's that
waves.
building and the ocean, the waves. Yeah, it's lovely.
And you can make it even more lovely, that one. So here, if we are using that spectral capabilities by selecting that, and right now I can, for example, crank up the noise. So right now on one end it is more noise, and if I do that, I can change the sound in a way that let's say natural wavy thing also comes into it. And then another thing that I can't demonstrate here right now, but if you ever try it out, I give that as a recommendation to you. What's really fun is to take layers of Abyss and then simply trigger it with the same controller. So, and then you can take random patches. One patch here, a pad here, a noise there, and another one there. And then it plays all the three at the same time. And it gives that lovely moving sounds that are all over the place. And they're sometimes extremely dense, but they're going on to evolve forever. I can spend hours in doing
I was going to say, I can imagine an entire ambient album just done with a handful of patches.
Definitely. If you're in ambient, or also if you're in, let's say, that darker areas of techno music, if you're looking for that dark atmospheric sound, that is your instrument, because it will give you that gritty vibe. You can always use that filter so that it doesn't cut through too much in your mix, but it is giving you that kind of atmosphere that you're seeking in that genre. And then, of course, ambient. And then also all kinds of underscoring for cinematic stuff, or if you're doing it for the movies. And maybe one thing that I'd like to mention here, because there was that question on, is it based on samples? And I think there's lovely sample libraries, and I own a lot of these, that you can use for cinematic underscoring. The only problem that I have with these libraries is they sound great, they're very inspirational, and then you buy them, you start making 3 or 4 tracks with it, and you really love it, and then 2 months later you're in the movies or you're listening to a sound and they say, hey, that's my sound. They have stolen my sound, I use it in my music. And that is a little bit that disadvantage of that sampling libraries, because especially that sound that gives you all that inspiration, sounds so great, are that ones that also all the other people use. And
someone else is using it, yeah.
I had been bitten by it quite a couple of times. And that was also one of the design goals for Abyss. I wanted to have that same kind of sounds that are deep and organic and atmospheric, evolving and stuff like that, but in a way that you can modify them in a few seconds, and then it is your own, and no one else is going to have that sound. And so you can use it, and you're never ever going to sit somewhere and say, well, they have taken my sound. Yeah.
I mean, I particularly like drum and bass. I'm an old drum and bass head myself, and I'm noticing that some of the cutting edge artists in that genre are really using noise creatively to add sort of tension, behind, really sort of clinically created sort of beats and basses. But, noise, just that sort of blanket noise can be really effective in, elevating a mood of a track.
And here there's also one nice thing that you can do. So I'm also using a lot in the sound design. So what you can do is, so I remove it here just to show that a little trick. Let's say we are taking any kind of sounds that we like. So it's not a particular fancy one. I'm taking it also to the other end. And then right now on one end, I'm adding all that noise. And so in the way that I like it. And I take another one somewhere in the middle where I have a little bit less noise, and maybe a fourth one here, even with less noise. And right now I can blend between, on one end where I have that sound that maybe it's also kind of an atmospheric thing, and on the other hand, on the other end of that thing, I have that noise. So something that has been completely unrelated before suddenly becomes related, and you have all that kind of transition. And especially if you think of all that risers that you're using in that kind of genres, or also in cinematic music and drops and stuff like that, that's perfect for that kind of tension makers.
Absolutely. So cool. Very cool. Okay, let's just see. Last couple of minutes. I see a question for Traction from Fardine. What's coming up for 3D spatial audio? We actually have a couple of potential Traction Presents developers who are creating some products in that space, but they're not currently ready for prime time. So yes, watch this space. And yes, updates to Waveform. Currently, obviously, it's still stereo, but we certainly have stuff on the feature roadmap that would include spatial. So, it'll all kind of come together at the right time. It's in the future. But yes, it's coming. Okay, let's see if there's anything else. Okay, I don't see any other sort of pointed questions, so let's just tail out with a couple more patches, and then thank you for joining us, all of you guys around the world. More information on the site, like we say, it's still on sale this week, so you've got a couple of days to trial it, and then if you love it, please do go buy it while it's on sale. And thank you for attending.
Yes, also thank you from my end. And if there is anything, you can always just reach out to me. So you will find my email address in the net. Just send me a message, and I'm answering all that personal messages, private messages I'm getting. So if you have a question, if you have some big idea or whatever, or if you just don't like it and you want to tell me why you don't like it, just tell me. Okay, cool. So I play a little bit of my bad keyboard thingies. Boom. Oh, and I have one which I think is called something like The End. Something like that. Endless Wind Now. I thought that would be a good idea to end it with that, but I don't find it. There are too many, simply.
Too many.
I think it's this one. The Silent Sea. So, enjoy your day. Have a nice time.
Fabulous.
Okay.
All right, that's us as a wrap. Again, thank you everyone for joining us, and keep your eyes open for the next Traction live stream We're going to be doing them every 2 or 3 weeks or so. So yeah, look forward to seeing you next time.
Bye.